Hi you guys, and welcome back to another true crime and makeup time video. If you're new here, my name is Zara and I post a new true crime video every single week. So if you love makeup and you love true crime, go ahead and leave me a comment down below letting me know what you want to see next or what you enjoyed about today's video. And definitely make sure to subscribe, guys. It would mean so much to me and I would love to have you join the fam. Okay, so today's case has been on my mind lately, and especially since I was like going through the notes app in my phone, and I remember I wrote this down and I was like, oh my God, how could I forget about this case? And I looked around and I didn't find like a bunch of people covering it. So I hope you guys find this case as interesting as I did. And yeah, let's get into it. Today we are talking about Heather Mack and a horrific crime that took place in Bali. But before we get into that, let's go back to Chicago and let's talk about Heather's parents. So Heather's father, James L. Mack, was born in 1929. And at the time, he was already like a super well-established man. He was an educator, a composer, an arranger, and this career originated when he taught jazz studies at Crane Junior College, which was Chicago's oldest city college. James actually moved to Chicago from Alabama with his family when he was only 5, and he is actually credited with teaching a bunch of new and upcoming musicians on the city's south side who would actually later on become internationally famous. Some were founding members of the group Earth, Wind and Fire, and others who were session players for the Shy Lights, Phil Collins, B.B. King, like huge names. James had a second job as an arranger for major labels like Chess, Capitol, and even Columbia Records, which is very impressive. And he even later served as a guest conductor at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. In his early years, he had a son and 4 daughters by 2 previous marriages. Sheila von Weiss, or Weiss, was born in 1952 in Minneapolis, and she studied political science in Boston. And she worked at universities collecting diplomas and degrees. And she actually at one time worked for Ted Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy. And she had a pretty great life. Like, she did well for herself. Sheila then met James, and after a while, in 1996, they got married. And they got married when James was 66 and Sheila was 44. And I mean, 66 isn't young, but it's not super old to get married. But at that time, James, he was like in the twilight of his career and he began suffering health problems at that age. Many of his friends were actually very confused by the marriage, not only because his new wife was 22 years his junior, but more so at the fact that he decided to get married and then conceive a child at the age of 66. So to have a child at that age, to many of his friends, they were kind of like, what are you doing? But James was happy and that's what he was doing. So at the age of 44, Sheila gives birth to a baby girl in 1996 named Lois Heather Mack. And together the family lived in the prestigious suburb of Oak Park in Illinois. And they lived in this $1.5 million like Italian Renaissance style home. And growing up, Heather attended Oak Park High School and River Forest High School. The family was super close, and like I mentioned, a lot of his friends would question, James's friends would question why he even got married so late. And then also by the time they got married, James had begun suffering health issues. So in their eyes, it was kind of like, what woman wants to marry like, an older guy, 22 years her senior, and then not only is he older, but then he, suffers all these health issues. But friends were stating that nobody could figure out how they ended up together and how especially he ended up with her. And his friends believed that he was definitely in a situation where he just needed somebody and he didn't want to be alone maybe at that age and then with his health issues. But his friends also state that even though he did this and got married, to not be alone, in many ways he was alone in that big mansion in Oak Park, because friends also stated that Sheila discouraged James from socializing even with his adult children. even with his family, his friends, everything. Like Sheila would just discourage him from doing so. However, James and his youngest daughter, Heather, so her name is Lois Heather Mack, but she's known as Heather. So James and his youngest daughter, Heather, they were super close, like very, very close. He basically gave her the world and he loved to spoil her and take her on like a bunch of vacations. That was like their thing. That's what the family often did. They would travel to these exotic locations around the world, and like I guess that was like their hobby as a family. However, when Heather was still pretty young, her father James, he began using a wheelchair due to his illnesses progressing, and at this time he was also diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, which is just so hard to deal with. Any cancer is just so hard to deal with. So in 2001, the Macks, they went on a Royal Caribbean cruise to Athens, Greece. And it was like this Caribbean Mediterranean cruise. And I've actually been on a Royal Caribbean cruise and it was so much fun. But anyway, during this trip, James actually suffered from an injury and he injured his foot on the cruise ship. And at the time, you know, they have like a medical staff and a medical team. So he went and sought help from the ship's like medical care team, but he didn't receive adequate care, which actually ended up in him being partially paralyzed. So he filed a lawsuit against the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, stating that he had to urinate in a bottle and this paralysis was really, you know, affecting his life, obviously. But this lawsuit took many, many years to resolve because it's a pretty big, like that's a pretty big cruise line to sue. And it took so many years, it actually took a decade because the settlement for this 2001 lawsuit took place in 2011. And he won this lawsuit. So $340,000 was awarded to Sheila Mack, which is his wife, and $500,000 like odd was allocated to James. Sorry, before I said they went to Athens, Greece on the cruise, they didn't. They went on a Mediterranean like combo cruise, like a cruise you stop at multiple locations. In 2006, they went on a family vacation again to Athens, Greece. So this was like 5 years after that cruise. And at the time on this trip, Heather was 10 years old. And, you know, like I said, this family, they love to take vacations. That was their thing. And unfortunately, what was supposed to be like a super happy family trip ended up really bad. On this trip, he suffered a pulmonary embolism and actually died in his hotel room at the age of 76 years old. Now, what's alleged is that Sheila, during this vacation, left James's body in a morgue, like in a Greek morgue, and then continued her vacation with Heather for the rest of the trip. So I think that is kind of strange, but that's allegedly what happened. And I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, the family was devastated, but especially 10-year-old Heather, like she's only 10 as well. Like that would have been so hard to deal with at that age, you know, especially if you're super close to your father. And for those who grew up with older fathers, like I've known a few friends who've kind of had like older dads, they kind of already know that their father, like from a young age, they know that their father is older, you know, so they're already a little bit more protective towards them and things like that. So imagine losing your father at 10 and he's already an older guy. I feel like it would have been truly, truly devastating. And it was so bad that Heather actually really took the death of her father really, really badly. She did not take it well at all. Sheila and Heather would go on to try and deal with the loss of James. And obviously James, you know, he really took care of his family and he was prepared, especially of his daughter, you know, Heather. He was super close with her. And he set up a trust fund for Heather. And she was only 10 when he passed away, but he obviously already had everything sort of handled for her. And by the time she was 21, she was going to be rich, honey, rich. I'm talking millions. But once James died, problems began to emerge. Heather, you know, just like I said, didn't cope well with it. And she dropped out of high school 2 years early. And she actually lived in 2 different facilities for minors who were dealing with like mental health issues. And these facilities were actually set up or set in place by the juvenile court system. So she was struggling. Heather was struggling. Neighbors stated that at this time, Sheila appeared to be having some difficulties with her troubled daughter, and that she often turned to the neighbors for help. And as Heather, began to grow older, the two of them, their relationship and the arguments between them, they would just grow more and more heated and more violent. Heather stated that the two of them, her and her mother, they were close, but Sheila was pretty overbearing, to the point where she would make Heather actually sleep with her in the same bed at night. It is reported that the police were called to the Mack residence over 86 times on theft and domestic violence reports between the years 2004 and 2013. In January 2010, it's alleged that Heather punched her mother's broken ankle, and she was also accused of stealing $1,000. In February 2001, it's alleged that Heather broke her mother's arm, and then she disconnected the phone cord to prevent her from calling 911 for help. Like, they had serious fights. Then in July 2001, Heather apparently threatened her mother. In November 2012, she allegedly bit her mother, but Sheila, she prevented the police from actually taking photos of the bite for evidence. And she wouldn't even let police like detain Heather or take Heather away, like, I guess, to face some repercussions, but she didn't allow it to happen. Heather also then stated that she had to have 2 abortions under her mother's control. So their relationship clearly went downhill after the father's passing. A family friend also claimed that Sheila and Heather actually bonded over shoplifting, and they would do so by shoplifting thousands and thousands of dollars of really expensive French cosmetics. Heather has also stated that when she turned 18, she tried to move out of the home on numerous occasions, but every time she would do so, Sheila would call her or send her photos or messages threatening to commit suicide if Heather didn't return home and come and stay with her and live with her. So yeah, it seemed like the death of James really spiraled this family out of control, and Heather also, maybe lost her place in life. But if the claims about Heather's mother's behavior are also true, it also seemed like, and don't come from me, that Sheila was possibly very toxic and didn't really know how to raise a teenage daughter who was going through these issues, and someone who had many problems and couldn't cope with the loss of her father, and who possibly needed more help than, I don't know, what do you do with a troubled teenager, right? I feel like Heather possibly needed help, at the time. Losing her father was really hard for Heather. She got into, lots of problems. She fell into depression, drugs, she partied a lot, drank a lot, and she, just possibly also just hung out with the wrong people. They were just not the right people to support her. And I mean, especially if you're doing these kinds of things and you want to do these kinds of things as a teenager, especially, you're not going to get along with your mom. You know what I mean? So while she was a senior at Oak Park High School, Heather began dating a boy named Tommy Schaefer, who was 3 years older than her. And he was an unemployed rapper who went by the name Tommy EXX. And obviously Heather's mother, especially if she seemed kind of controlling, did not agree with their relationship. She didn't agree with her and Tommy dating. So she moved her and Heather out of that Oak Park mansion into an apartment in the Gold Coast, which is still like a nice area, hoping, that this was going to put space between the couple and that they would just not have a chance to be together. Tommy, had a mother who gave him everything. She did her best to put him in this great school, but Tommy, oh no, he was like, school ain't for me. I'm going to be a rapper. I'm going to be huge. But yeah, so he didn't do well in this endeavor because he would end up sleeping on like friends' couches and things like that, as clearly he wasn't making bank with his career. Heather was clearly attracted to this, as you are when you're a teenager. You're like, yep, that guy is going to give me the best life. So anyway, after all this conflict, and I mean, police coming to your home like 86 times in 9 years is insane. Sheila was like, okay, I got to do something about this. So she suggests that her and Heather, they, go and take a vacation, just the two of them, go somewhere and just reset and get their relationship back on track and just be like the good old days. So on August 4th, 2014, Sheila and Heather go on a trip to Bali, first class, of course, spending 10 days at the beautiful St. Regis Bali Resort. Like, wow, guys, I'm gonna like put pictures of this place up because it is so gorgeous. And I'm like, hello, when I make that money, honey, I'm going down there because it's gorgeous. So on 12th August 2014, a taxi driver drives into the St. Regis like entrance area and he drops off a couple. And as he's leaving to like make his way out of the resort, he gets flagged down by a young couple. They had a suitcase with them and they asked him to open up his trunk so they could put the suitcase in there. So the taxi driver's like, cool. He gets out of his vehicle and he, offers to help the couple. And when the couple refuses, like they don't take the help, they're like, no, just let us do it. He was kind of like, okay, that's kind of weird because, I'm guessing the people staying at the St. Regis are like, put my bags in this car, you know what I mean? But this couple were like, no, we're going to do it ourselves. So that already was kind of like weird to him. So then the couple says to him, okay, we're checking out of this hotel. Like, we'll be right back. Hold on. And then the next thing he knows, the couple like runs off. So the taxi driver was like, okay. So he waits there for a little while, but now it's been like 30 minutes and he's like, okay, this is weird. And at this point, he was already suspicious because the couple, didn't take his help. And then now he's thinking, okay, maybe there's drugs or something in this bag because Bali, as you guys know, is very strict on drugs. So he was already like, oh shit. So he gets out, he goes to the back, he opens his trunk. And as he's opening the trunk, he sees like blood smears on the bumper. He opens the trunk and he sees the suitcase inside. And the suitcase has blood smears all over it. So pretty much his car and the item in his car had blood stains and smears all over it. So he was like, holy shit. So he calls the police. So the police arrive. They come, they take out this suitcase, they open it up. And keeping in mind, this is a St. Regis. Can you imagine like the people around Anyway, so they open the suitcase and they find the body of a woman inside, a whole ass woman in this suitcase. This woman had been beaten to death. So they go back to the hotel. They try and find records of all the guests. And they were then able to identify this woman as being Sheila von Weiss Mack, Heather's mom. So then they're like, okay, who was this woman with? Then they check the records again. They go, okay, wait, this woman was with her daughter, Heather. Where's Heather? So they go back to the hotel room, hoping to find maybe Heather over there. But what they discovered instead was a massive crime scene. And it was clearly the crime scene where Sheila had been beaten to death. Blood and glass everywhere. And everything was just in disarray. They found a broken fruit bowl with the handle bloody, like there was blood all over it. And they concluded that this was clearly the murder weapon and that Sheila had been hit over the head with this fruit bowl. Sheila's cause of death was asphyxiation because she also had a broken nose and a broken neck. And she also showed defensive wounds as she had bruises on her arms and some of her fingers were broken. But again, where was Heather? As the police continue investigating, the hotel staff tell police that earlier that day at around 3:30 a.m., Sheila actually attended reception in a panic because she wanted to report her daughter Heather as missing. So everyone's in a panic and, the hotel staff like, okay, well, we'll send out a search party. And as they were about to send security staff to the beachfront resort to look for Heather, in walks Heather through the hotel lobby at 3:30 a.m., but she wasn't alone. she was holding hands with her boyfriend, Tommy, in Bali. Like, hey, Tommy, what are you doing in Bali? So obviously, following this, a huge argument takes place between Heather and Sheila, which got even worse when Sheila realized that Heather paid for Tommy's room, a second room at the St. Regis Resort, using Sheila's credit card. The manager of the hotel said that Sheila became surprised and really angry when she realized that her daughter's boyfriend, Tommy, had checked into the hotel just 3 hours prior. Sheila then exclaimed, "I'm not paying for Tommy's room," before her and Heather, they walked back to their room. And another employee who was in the vicinity said that he heard Sheila tell Heather that once they get back to the States, she's going to pursue credit card fraudulent charges. And that moment, 3:34 a.m., was the last time that Sheila was seen alive. Now, Heather's passport was still found in the hotel safe, so police knew that she couldn't really get far without this, and she obviously couldn't leave the country. So police alerted media and said to be on the lookout for this couple. Police then began their search, and it wouldn't be long till they found Heather and Tommy. They actually found them the very next day at a budget motel not far from the St. Regis, and they were arrested. They also used their real names to check into this hotel, and they also used Sheila's credit card to pay for this hotel. Clearly not the smartest move. So when they were arrested, they at first denied any involvement in the crime. They initially tell police that they had been held captive by an armed gang at the resort whose members killed Sheila, but Tommy and Heather managed to escape. They kept up with the story for a while, and they said that they were actually on the run from this gang. That's why they were staying at the budget motel, because they were trying to hide from this armed gang. What a stupid excuse, because hello, it's the St. Regis Hotel. Like, don't you think they have cameras everywhere? Don't you think they would have captured the gang coming into the hotel, into the lobby, into the rooms? Even if they entered some other way, there's cameras everywhere. And obviously the police went and checked out the cameras, and they didn't find any evidence of any armed gang ever being in this hotel. So then Tommy and Heather changed their story and say that Tommy actually came to Bali to surprise Sheila and announce together with Heather that Heather and him were expecting a baby. Now, later reports also confirm that this was untrue. Not the pregnancy, but the fact that Sheila had already known about this pregnancy prior to them arriving in Bali. It was found in emails that Sheila had written to her friends prior to the Bali trip and during the Bali trip, that Sheila had stated in these emails that she was already aware of Heather's pregnancy with Tommy. In an email to a friend on 2nd of May 2014, Sheila wrote this: "Heather was violent tonight and left. When you live the way I have lived with Heather for so many years, the problems become almost your normal way of life. I am really scared of what she may do next." In her final email on August 8th, 2014, Sheila sends this to a friend. She writes, "I am more frightened than ever. I will keep in touch." So what really happened that night? So in July 2014, Heather, she drops out of school because she becomes pregnant with her third child. And this time it was Tommy's child. And according to Heather, Sheila scheduled this vacation to Bali to convince her to have a third abortion and get rid of this pregnancy. And during this vacation that was supposed to be, about the two of them, Sheila, she falls down, she's drunk and she has a drunken accident and falls down and hurts her ankle. And she becomes bedridden for sort of the remainder of the trip. And she was also on painkillers. So Heather then decides to use her mom's credit card and spend $12,000 to fly in Tommy first class into Bali so he can spend the rest of the vacation with her. Yeah. Keep in mind, they had 3 days left of this trip, $12,000 for 3 days, plus a second hotel room for Tommy, which can cost, at the St. Regis, it can cost up to $1,400 a night, USD. That's even more in AUD. That's a lot of money. So hotel cameras show the two of them arguing in the lobby that night, Sheila and Heather, and Tommy's obviously there, and that's the night or the day that Tommy arrived into Bali. And after Sheila goes back to her room, goes to bed, Tommy and Heather, they didn't cool down. Instead, they ended up taking a walk on the beach where they spent the next few hours plotting Sheila's death. Heather wanted to be free of Sheila's control, and they believed that Tommy, he, wanted part in the riches, which at the time they believed that Heather could have inherited almost $11 million. That Heather would have stood to gain from the entire Mack estate, including Sheila's wealth. In texts that were later found and presented in court, Tommy encouraged Heather to suffocate Sheila in her sleep, but Heather couldn't go through with it. So it wasn't a new idea. Back in Chicago, it was found that Tommy and Heather had actually spent months trying to come up with a scheme to kill Sheila by an overdose. And they even offered Tommy's cousin Ryan Bibbs $50,000 to find them a hitman. And they actually were seeking his advice on how to carry out the murder. And he would get, a share, I guess, of the riches. So by the way, his cousin Ryan, who advised them on murder methods, I guess, he was found guilty of conspiracy to commit a foreign murder on a US citizen. And I believe he got 9 years in jail for that. So just off a text. So you better watch what you're writing to people. So then the next morning, another argument erupts between Heather and Sheila. And this argument is now about Heather having an abortion and how she needs to get rid of the baby, that there's no future with Tommy and, she's too young to have a baby. And this fight allegedly took place because Heather initially at the start of the trip said, yes, fine, mom, I'm going to have this abortion. She agreed to having this abortion. And then at this point, this morning, she was like, no, I'm not going to have an abortion now. She was changing her mind. It was then alleged that Heather sends Tommy a text message that morning telling him that she's afraid and to bring something heavy. Tommy states that through this text message, he believed that Heather was in danger, and he then proceeds to bring a decorative fruit bowl from his room into Sheila and Heather's room. Now there's surveillance footage of him walking through the hallways with this decorative fruit bowl hidden under his sweatshirt. And he even sent Heather a picture of this fruit bowl via text, is this it? Is this fruit bowl cool? Is this gonna be the murder weapon kind of thing? Which it's so weird because wouldn't you just bring, even if he was planning on using that fruit bowl, wouldn't you just bring it, just walk around with it? Why would you hide it? So I feel the fact that he was hiding it under his sweatshirt and he was so sus about it, they clearly knew what they were going to be using that fruit bowl for. So Tommy now enters the room, Heather and Sheila's room, with this fruit bowl. And according to Heather, both Tommy and Sheila had each drank a bottle of champagne earlier that morning. And Sheila, she's furious when Tommy enters the room and she starts calling Tommy the N-word. And Tommy replies but your husband was black. And Sheila says, well, that doesn't matter because he was rich. Sheila then allegedly tells Heather that she was black enough. Heather was obviously mixed race. Sheila's white and her father was black. So she tells her she's black enough and that if she has a baby with Tommy, then the baby would be even blacker. Sheila then allegedly threatens to cut the baby out of Heather's body if she didn't go ahead and have this third abortion. At this time, Heather would have been around 2 months pregnant. So when Sheila starts threatening Heather with this, Tommy becomes enraged and he pulls out this fruit bowl from under his sweatshirt and proceeds to beat Sheila to death with it. According to the coroner, Sheila died of asphyxiation from a broken nose, which is kind of a crazy way to die because she couldn't breathe. Heather claims that during the attack, she hid in the bathroom. And when she emerged later on, Tommy was trying to resuscitate her mother. They said that they tried to phone the police and the US consulate, But in their panic, they decided to, take the body, transport her to the US consulate like by themselves. And the way that they planned to do this was in a suitcase. So according to Heather, Tommy was saying like, we should just leave her body here and run. But Heather was like, no, I don't want to just leave my mom's body here. So instead, they wrapped Sheila's body up in a bed sheet and stuffed it into her own silver suitcase. And as they were trying to do that, I mean, Sheila's a grown woman trying to fit into a suitcase. They snapped her neck in the process. Surveillance footage shows the couple like moving back and forth between their room and the lobby. And at one point, Heather even goes to like the reception in the lobby and says, oh, do you guys have duct tape? And she borrows duct tape from them. And then she also proceeds to grab like a luggage trolley cart. And it was around noon that they attempted to leave the hotel with this suitcase. And the whole time they refused, staff assistance, because again, at these hotels, like these fancy ones, staff is always trying to help you. They're trying to get a tip. So they're always trying to help you. And they just kept refusing assistance before they went to attempt to load this suitcase into that taxi. And as they were leaving, actually, a manager at the reception desk goes to ask them about their hotel bill. Like, okay, if you're checking out, like, what about the bill? The hotel staff member who inquired about this bill actually said that they had a few pieces of luggage with them, like attempting to check out of the hotel. And the largest suitcase, like the biggest silver one, had been wrapped in a bed sheet, but then had like duct tape wrapped around it to try and like keep it secure. And it also looked to be spotted with blood. And when she asks the couple, what is this stain? Heather tells her like, oh, it's makeup. And when she was actually stopped by the staff, Heather allegedly said like, does this mean we can't go? But then I don't know what happened. They were able to leave the hotel and go out to the taxi area, load the, luggage into the taxi, keeping in mind that this freaking luggage was smeared with blood. So I don't know how, like, no one stopped them. But Heather says that when the driver was kind of like questioning it and was being suspicious, they decided to run. And that was when the taxi driver, alerted authorities. So on 20th August 2014, the Bali police take Heather in and give her an ultrasound and a urine test, which confirmed her pregnancy, because initially they thought that, her claiming that she was pregnant was just a way to get her like sent home back to the US. And then on 19 September 2014, Tommy admits to killing Sheila, and Heather admitted to helping him stuff the body in the suitcase. They were both charged with premeditated murder on January 14, 2015, which in Indonesia is punishable by death by a firing squad. They don't play over there, let me tell you. Tommy claimed that he attacked and killed Sheila because she threatened to harm their unborn baby. However, he also posted on his Facebook page prior to even arriving in Bali, leaving August 4th for Indonesia, might not come back. So did he know why he was going to Bali? Did he know he was going there to kill Sheila and that he could possibly be arrested and not come back? If so, they are both dumbasses, because if you're going to commit a crime in another country, at least like research that country and how strict their laws are and what the hell is going to happen to you over there. Because it seems like they would have been better off like committing the crime in the US, because again, Indonesia's no joke with these types of crimes. Like, they don't play. Heather claims that her mother, Sheila, drank a lot and abused her a lot, hit her, scratched her, punched her, would even put out cigarettes on her. But from the 86 times that police visited the Mack residence, we also know that Sheila was making similar claims against Heather. Neighbors would claim that the mother-daughter duo just had a mutually abusive relationship. They just had a terrible relationship. In April 2015, the Bali court sentenced Heather to 10 years in prison for assisting in the murder of her mother, and Tommy was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the actual murder. The Bali court found that Tommy was legally and convincingly guilty that he had premeditated the murder. Prosecutors initially had called for a 15-year jail term for Heather, which is only 3 years less than what Tommy got. But the court later stated that they had been more lenient to Heather because she had recently given birth to a child. Tommy and Heather split, obviously, after their sentencing. So what was all this for? What was it for? During the trial, Heather gave birth to a baby girl named Stella on 17th March 2015. And what's insane is she was actually able to keep Stella in jail with her and raise her up until Stella turned 2 years old. I mean, isn't that insane for a baby to be raised in jail? Like, she wouldn't know anything up until the age of 2, like outside of that prison. When Stella turned 2, Heather gave Stella up to a foster family who would raise Stella up until Heather was done with her jail sentence. And she was even able to have visits with Stella once a week, which I feel like is much more than she would have gotten in the US. Like, A, she wouldn't have been able to keep the baby. And then B, I'm pretty sure, like, depending where she was sent to prison, it's not that easy to just go and visit, you know, with your child once a week, you know? Like, she was pretty lucky in that sense to have that relationship with her child. Tommy's mother had actually been fighting for custody of Stella for a long time because she didn't want Stella, and Tommy didn't want Stella growing up like that. But the information of that kind of fizzled out, and I couldn't really find out what happened, but she, you know, didn't get custody of Stella. Since then, Tommy has made numerous claims about Heather and states that Heather is super selfish for not giving up Stella as a baby and forcing her to grow up, you know, in squalor, in the jail cell, in degradation, while Heather spends all her money on drinks and doing drugs and having sex with women inmates, all in the presence of his daughter. Tommy says that when he thinks about what he did to Sheila, he is so disgusted with himself more than anyone else ever could be. Every morning, he says he wakes up feeling nothing more than scum. And he states that he has rarely seen his daughter since March 2020 when the pandemic began. Heather, on the other hand, was like thriving in her new environment, which is insane because when you come from like a life of privilege, right? Like even just being in a westernized country, then going to like a Bali prison, it is very, very, very different to like Western culture. And I'm just surprised that she thrived in it. Like she just took to it. She was just like, oh yeah, this is home. She is really smart and she used her intellect to adopt not only the language, like the Balinese language, but also all their mannerisms and stuff. Like she just took on this new role. She also like capitalized on her notoriety by like making as much of a name for herself in prison than she did through the crime. With access to a phone and social media in prison, don't ask me how, she regularly would post like updates and photos of herself and Stella up until 2017 when Stella was sent to live with the foster family. Heather also showed videos of herself and posted on social media of herself like smoking, drinking, dancing, partying, and being like stroked and caressed by her prison girlfriend. At the time, her name was Raphael. So Heather was also the beneficiary of a $1.6 million trust fund left to her by her mother, which would pay her small annual payments until she hit the age of 30, and then she would receive like the balance. But during the court case, $150,000 was approved through the estate to pay for her legal fees, plus smaller payments for like food and medical expenses and things like that. Sheila's brother, Bill Weiss, was the executor of that estate, and he expressed concern a while ago, stating that he believed that a lot of the money was being used to cover up bribes because he got a demand from an Indonesian lawyer for a lump sum payment of $200,000 for like legal expenses that there was like no evidence for what this expense was for. Like $200,000 USD converted is a lot. So what was this sum for? The final disposition of the trust was resolved in 2018 when it was decided by a court that the new beneficiary would be the daughter Stella, who would receive the balance of the estate eventually. So recently, on October 29th, 2021, Heather was released from the Bali prison after she served just a total of 7 years. She was also able to leave Bali with her daughter Stella. However, when she stepped foot into the United States, upon her arrival, she was arrested in Chicago for conspiracy to commit murder in a foreign country, another count of conspiracy to commit the murder of a US national, and another count of obstruction. If she is convicted, she can face a maximum term of life imprisonment for the first 2 counts and 20 years for the count of obstruction. So Heather at this point has pleaded not guilty. Whew, this case, you guys, it is so complex, and I'm sure more information is going to come out soon, especially with her trial and everything. But is it bad that I feel sorry for Tommy? Like, do you guys feel sorry for Tommy? A little bit? I know what they did was wrong, and oh my God, he killed his girlfriend's mother, like really in a bad way too. But even though he was 21, he seemed so dumb and so stupid. Like both of them were so dumb, but technically Heather was really smart. Like she seems like a really smart person, and that's what people also claim, that she's very intelligent. Her behavior in jail seems like she was totally fine with the outcome and even happier in jail. And 7 years, she's probably like, oh, that's totally worth it. Like she's crazy. She claims that she has remorse over her mom's death, but she sure as hell doesn't show it. And isn't it crazy how in cases like this, the psycho person always ends up having a child the same gender as them? Do you know what I mean? So in this case, she, had issues with her mother, Sheila. She lost her father at a young age, didn't have him growing up, and then she became like this. Does that mean Stella's fate is kind of the same way? I mean, Stella lost her father at a really young age, doesn't really know him until he gets out of prison. Hopefully he'll be able to, know his daughter. But now she has this freaking mother who, like, what do we know what their relationship's going to be like unless Heather, prevents this generational curse and like treats Stella a bit differently and really does have a better life for her. It's kind of like these are how like these patterns like repeat themselves, I hope not. I hope Tommy is able to have some type of relationship with Stella after his release, and because he genuinely seems like he knows what he did was wrong and that he's learned from it and that he might live a better life, at least from the articles that I've read, like his interviews, you know what I mean? Like we don't really know these people. But yeah, seems like Heather really kind of won on this one because she's left with all this money. Like, don't you guys feel the estate should have been taken away? Because even though it's given to Stella, who controls Stella? Who will be able to control her finances? Heather. So I feel like there should have been some type of, I don't know, some type of law protecting Stella a little bit better, and I hope there is one. So it's an insane case, you guys. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I hope you guys found this case interesting. I hope you haven't really heard of it before. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to subscribe if you've watched this far. And I will see you in the next one, guys. Besitos. Mwah. Bye.